So let's get it started. Welcome to the Tri-Scrum webcast, series number 35, the first webcast for this year 2022. I'm very glad and happy to welcome Arne. I'm going to talk about a little bit of introduction about Arne in a while. So this webcast is going to be more of an open conversation, guys who are on the Zoom. It's going to be the next generation leadership. So we're going to have an open and casual chat with Arne, understanding his views on what does it like when we say next generation leadership, of course, considering the future of work. Tech setup, yes, you'll be muted throughout the webcast, but we will definitely give an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. We will reserve some time. So this is hosted by triscrum.com, a management consulting firm with a strong mission to humanize organizations. So we feel humanizing organization means building capable and resilient organization. So that is very much required for the digital age, especially the complexities that we are seeing nowadays. So for more information, please visit triscrum.com. And this is a part of Triscrum Studios. We are one of the community company, focuses more on the community events. We have been nominated consecutively twice a year by the World Agility Forum for the community work that we have been doing from India. Thank you so much for all the support. I think most of you on the call extended the support, including the crew members. I'm very, very happy and excited. He is not our new speaker. He is our, I would say, frequent guest to the Triscrum webcast. One of the senior members, certified Scrum trainer with Scrum Alliance, and also I would say long-standing TAC member who is a part of a trainer approval committee, has got a lot of wisdom, and perhaps he has so many CSTs that is coming out in the market today. I'm very happy to welcome Arne, who is a principal consultant, coach, and a trainer, very senior member who's been teaching Scrum for years and years. Arne, welcome to Triscrum webcast. This is not a new place for you. How does it feel like?
Thank you. It feels good. And I'm honored to be your first conversation partner of this new year. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Arne. So with that note, we are not going to keep you waiting, guys. So we'll get into the conversation. So Arne, today I'm really excited because one is I'm welcoming you back. And the other reason is the topic, the next generation leadership. So before I get onto the topic, I just wanted to understand maybe your high level perspective on when you talk about the next generation leadership. Let's talk about the digital age and agile leadership first of all. So who is an agile leader, Arne, in your view?
So in my view, an agile leader is anyone who is leading an organization that wants to work in an agile way. But it's not only that, it's also people who are supporting others to becoming more agile. So you could be within your own company, and you could be on different levels of your company and still be an agile leader if you're supporting others. And I would say the third part in my answer is anyone working according to agile can lead themselves and lead others to become more successful and more agile, if that's what you want, and if that is what you believe will guide your organization to success. Otherwise, you should find other ways of working than agile, of course. But let's assume that we know why we want to become agile, and then it's about leading yourself and others in that direction from different parts of the organization.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a lot of wisdom in your statement, right? So when you talk about it's not about just leading others, leading yourself, right? And also leading others. Everybody is a leader, leadership at every level to some extent, right? And one of the challenges that on an average, if you see in the industry, Arne, how do you make that happen? So I just wanted to get your perspective on, if you want to really build that leadership at every level, what kind of paradigm shifts that you think might be helpful for organizations?
So one of the things that I believe is necessary, I touched upon before, you need to understand what agile means, because there are essential things in agile, like cross-functional teams and self-organized teams. And that's not always the same as companies have been managed or led in the past. So there is a paradigm shift, I would say. And then you can take a look at the role of the leader. And from history, I think it's possible to derive kind of two parallel leadership ideas. One starting with industrialization and Taylor being more, if I may use that word, pushy, and one originating from Deming, being more allowing and thinking about what is actually the foundation for good quality results. So I believe that one paradigm shift for some could be that we look upon the leader as a gardener, as someone giving support, and as a facilitator, rather than someone pointing in with command and control. I believe leaders should point out directions, work with vision, for example, and that's a chapter of itself, you could say. So I tried to think a little about this shift from control to trust is one thing one way you can put it. From me as a leader to us working together could be another shift, and then a play with words. Some organizations believe that we should be very busy all the time. So you talk about busyness. So going from busyness to making business instead, doing the right things to create value. So from busyness to business. And from navigating a well-known landscape to navigating in a complex reality, which we face more and more and more and more. And in a complex reality, in order to succeed, probably we need to take smaller steps than we're used to. And that also involves inclusion and allowing diversity, because in a complex situation, there is not one single correct way. Different patterns will probably emerge, and you need to kind of capture that and figure out what is the next best step we can take, and then inspect and adapt, of course, which Agile is very much about. So those are a couple of ideas and thoughts about a paradigm shift.
Wow. So you talked about industrial revolution, right? So how it all started. There is, I would say, Hitler's idea. I don't want to talk about like Hitler's idea as such a Taylorism, command and control, and then the parallel ideas. Deming has done a wonderful job of, at least trying to help people, what kind of management shift thinking that should happen in the industry, right? So when I read some of the maybe the World Economic Forums, and also I tried to read some of the digital revolution, I saw a lot of shifts. So we all started with the industrial revolution, and we slowly moved into steel plants. Then slowly we entered into internet revolution, right? So that's the birth of www, and we started getting a lot of information exchange over the internet. And I kind of hearing now it's more of a deployment revolution now. So a new revolution that started coming in is a deployment revolution, especially after this COVID. So the digital industry is taking a good hands, and there is a lot of revolutionary change in terms of the way do we things. So I wanted to understand, we're talking about too many things here, right? So we talked about the leadership side, and we also talked about complexity and uncertainties around us. We are also talking about cross-functional team, self-organizing team on the other end. There is a lot of framework proliferation that is coming out and talking about how to deal with such complexity. So I wanted to take a pause and understand from you, Arne, what do you think about, what is the relationship that you think that exists between this leadership, one side, and the agility on the other side?
What I like to think about is a picture. I was lucky enough a couple of years ago, before we were hit by this pandemic in which we are in the middle right now, I had a fortune to travel to different countries, India among them. And I remember one time when I was in China, and it was Saturday evening, and on the square outside of the hotel in Shanghai, which I was visiting, I could hear music. So I thought that was interesting. So I went out of the hotel and into the square, and I saw people dancing. Pair dancing, and not all together like I imagine Bollywood, but you're better at that than I am, but pair dancing. And then that is for all of these pairs moving on a small area. They don't want to bump into each other. So I imagine, what if I was trying to tell them how to move? That wouldn't work. We need to rely upon the individuals and the pairs to do this thing. And that is very much what leading in agility is about. Trusting teams, trusting individuals to have and help them to get the right knowledge to solve the problems that we want them to solve. And then also give them the mandate to solve problems. Because sometimes you don't give people mandate to make decisions. Therefore, they ask the manager, and sometimes the manager is not allowed to make decisions. So the manager asks her manager, etc., etc. And it takes a lot of time. And we want to move fast. You talked before about resilience, and I believe that's really, really good if we can create resilient companies. But I also think we should create companies that are able to act as fast as possible in their context. I'm not saying fast solves everything, but faster is better than slower sometimes if the result is the same. So yeah, those are a couple of thoughts. So involve individuals, increase mandates, collaboration, of course, is important. And then one thing that I believe is really, really good to do is to visualize goals, where we are heading, and progress as well. And not only progress, visualize the problems we're facing right now. And then something that I will get back to later, I guess, allow mistakes. Not that we should encourage mistakes, but if we are operating in unknown territory, then we need to experiment. And if we experiment, we don't know for sure what will happen, because then it wouldn't be an experiment. So allow mistakes as long as we learn from them.
Yeah, so that's a very valuable lesson that maybe every company should try to learn and adapt their leadership style. And I'm having an interesting information in front of me, Arne. I just wanted to share this and get your thoughts. So when we look at the World Economic Forum, and what they say is, as on today, the top 10 most valuable companies in the world, as defined by the market capitalization, are Apple, Microsoft, Saudi Oil Company, Amazon, Alphabet, Facebook, Tencent Holdings, Tesla, Alibaba, and Berkshire. That is all. And the interesting figure is, if they compare this list with 2011, only 60% of those companies that got listed in 2011 is getting listed today. And if you go to one more decade, say 2001, only one company is present in the list, which is Microsoft. So when I look at this data, I'm getting both shocked and also excited, because in the last 10 years, there is a lot of disruption with respect to the digital age, technology, and to some extent people, right? There's a lot of complexity, maybe a man-made complexity or something that got disrupted on itself because of the different revolution that we have seen, right? That's not definitely a talking point. The talking point is going to be how to deal with this such a tediums that the leaders are forced to face today, right? It's not just the way that they have been managing companies or they have been leading people is not going to be the same when we look at this data. So I just wanted to understand your thoughts when you read this data or when you hear this kind of a data. What kind of maybe advice as an agile consultant and a coach, what kind of advice would you like to give to organizations that are trying to deal with such kind of complexity today?
Yeah, one thing that I try to do, I try to recognize that I have not been the leader or the manager of any of these fast-growing companies. So I need to approach my answer with some, yeah, I need to be humble because I cannot guarantee you that I'm right, but I have a couple of thoughts, and I know that I'm not the only one having these kind of thoughts. One of the things is I'm trying to look at what do I know and what do others know about the working conditions in these fast-growing companies. Are there anything we can learn from any of them? And I had a very interesting conversation with a former colleague of mine. We didn't meet for many years, but then he gave me a call a couple of weeks ago, and he was returning to Sweden after having spent a lot of years abroad working for Amazon. And it was really interesting hearing how they were dealing with things within Amazon. And he told me things that I'm not sure I should tell anyone, but there were good things. Things like giving the opportunity to make your own decisions as an individual and as teams, and a lot of team-based work as well. So that is one thing. And then things that I personally believe in is to create a shared vision, not only kind of pushing a vision towards people, but allowing them to create a shared vision. And I know that the first time I heard about those ideas was in the mid 1990s when I read a book by Peter Senge called The Fifth Dimension, and that book, or The Fifth Discipline, I believe it was. Anyway, he wrote a lot about creating a shared vision. And then I believe also that you should create psychological safety. And the go-to person for learning more about psychological safety is Amy Edmondson, who has written a lot of good books about that and is trying to help people understand that concept so that we actually get the honest answers and honest contributions from everyone. And we don't want people to feel oppressed at work. I believe as leaders, it's good to show appreciation as well, and acknowledge that it's the people within the organization that is creating most of the value. And I'm a sports fan, and I have my favorite football team, and it's football as we like it in Europe, not American football I'm talking about. And my favorite team, they just recruited a new manager, and what he told at the press conference when he was introduced about his philosophy. He said, "When I speak to the players, I always tell them that you win and I lose." What he meant by that is, if they win, it's because of the players and their capabilities together, and if they lose, it's because of his, as a manager of the team, his lack of knowledge or competence or support for the players to win. So I think that's a thing for leaders to remember as well. And then what I also strongly believe is that it's good to understand complexity. Look at the work by Dave Snowden, his Cynefin framework, and the tools that he presents about how to deal with a complex environment is open up the discussion, allow people to talk about where we are and where we want to go. And maybe most importantly, encourage dissent and diversity, because that will create new ideas. And maybe one of those will help us in the future. And then create an environment where in which good ideas can emerge. Good things should emerge from that environment. Those things, I believe, are true. And I think we see that in a lot of these companies that you mentioned. I cannot say to 100%, but I don't think they would be able to move as fast if they didn't have a lot of this, at least.
Yeah, I think at least a lot of companies have got a shared vision and they communicate their vision over and over again to people. At least I have personally experienced with a couple of employees from these companies. When I asked them, what is your company's vision? The next minute they would tell me that this is their company vision.
Yeah.
So that is there. There are some couple of interesting questions, Arne, which I would like to take now. The first question is very interesting. How an agile leader can measure the productivity of the team? That's a question.
So, I am not sure I agree that that is a good question. What I think is that productivity is one thing. That is a measure of how much we are creating. And if I can create a little and deliver a lot of value, I think that's okay. So I think we should measure how much value we can create, and as little work to give as much value as possible is what I'm aiming for. So productivity alone has to do with busyness, if I may expand on that. And I'm not always sure that that's the best thing. So we should kind of balance these things. What is the right thing to build and how to build it in the right way? And then therefore productivity is not unimportant, of course, but I would say that should not be the major focus for a manager, but focusing on building the right thing and then supporting teams, agile teams and individuals to build a thing in the right way. And taking small steps forward, we will learn as we go. And when we learn, if we have shorter feedback loops, one of the benefits of that is that we get a higher productivity. But I'm not sure that we should, if we measure productivity, we should measure other things as well. Quality, for example, and value delivered, customer satisfaction, or a couple of things that comes to mind.
Yeah, so I think if I have to summarize what you said, Arne, it's productivity is a very subjective term, right? So when we talk about productivity focuses more on getting more output from people, it is not something that the leader should be focusing on, Hari. And if they are really value driven, and if they're trying to balance the productivity and also trying to generate good amount of value, then it makes sense to have a conversation with people and understand how do they want to improve that productivity.
Yeah.
So I think there is another question. If you were to select one quality or one top skill that a next generation leader should possess, what that should be?
I'm
also thinking
it should be about understanding what drives individuals and teams, because we have different types of motivation. On one hand, we have this extrinsic motivation or extrinsic drivers, which you can call carrot or whip. And that helps in some situations. And then understanding what are the intrinsic motivators. And there is interesting research from Norway, a professor called Anders Dysvik, who identified 3 intrinsic drivers for knowledge workers. And if we understand that and we experiment with that and we try to understand what the individuals of our teams or an organization, what is driving them, then that will help us. And those 3: purpose, mastery, and autonomy. So having a purpose of what we're building together that aligns with my personal purpose. Mastery, becoming good at what I'm doing right now and in the future. So knowledge expansion and development. And autonomy, having the right to decide how I should do and how we as a team should go about building this product in the right way.
Yeah, so that I hope that answers your question, Kiran. So Arne was actually trying to summarize the top skill that is to basically trigger the intrinsic motivation. A couple of people joined a little late, so I'm just trying to rephrase. Autonomy, mastery, purpose are the three intrinsic motivators that really unleash people intelligence. So as a leader, we should try to always unleash that. So maybe I was thinking aloud when I read this question. Maybe, yeah. So if I have to put this together in one word, Kiran, I think if a leader is able to have abundant mindset, right, that's the good quality or the best quality that I would call him as her as a leader. So, so I have another question, Arne. Before I take that question, I wanted to ask you one more perspective on the next generation. So we talked about a lot with respect to the complexity. We also discussed about who is an agile leader, and nobody would disagree that we are actually facing the extreme complexity that we have never faced in the past, right? So we are definitely in the VUCA world. We need a leader that can unleash people intelligence, build self-organizing teams. So I wanted to understand if organizations will have to definitely build such leadership, right? If they are trying to or willing to build that kind of a leadership in their workplace. So what kind of suggestions, what are the couple of suggestions would you like to give to organizations that are trying to build next generation leadership?
So one of the things that I believe we benefit from may not sound that serious, but I'm very serious in proposing this. And that is that I believe we should create an atmosphere and a reality where people can have fun at work. And if our intrinsic drivers are satisfied, then we usually have fun at work. I was listening to a very interesting keynote a couple of years ago at a global conference, global Scrum gathering in Vienna in Austria. And Frederica Fabricius was the name of the woman giving that keynote. And she talked about 3 F's, F, 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 and fun, fear, and focus. That was what she called the success factors. And fun, because we want to feel that we are doing something fun, otherwise we get bored and our brains are not in it altogether. And fear, not that we should fear working, but stepping a little outside or large outside of our comfort zone, because that also activates our brains. And then those things helps us to focus. So making sure that we allow people to do things that is a little out of the ordinary and a little different from one day to another. And this also corresponds very well with what Amy Edmondson teaches about psychological safety. If we have a low psychological safety, we may not dare do anything. And if we have a high psychological safety, that may not be enough because the expectations on people may be too low. If we increase the expectations and have a high psychological safety, then we are in a zone where we can expect to have fun and focus and get results. So those are a couple of things that comes to mind.
That's nice, Arne, because it's basically, it touches 2 parts, leadership as well as the kind of environment they should create, right? Of course, there is, I mean, I would request the audience to not see this as a bureaucracy, because it's not just only leaders can create such kind of an environment, but it is the utmost accountability of leaders end of the day to ensure such kind of an environment exists for people and within which people are going to thrive, right? So that's the whole point we're trying to make here. And I see a question from Manish, but that's a question that we tried to answer, Manish, in the previous part. There are too many moving parts in Agile. Is it really true that we should focus on productivity? I think Arne cleared that, saying it depends on what does productivity mean? How do we define productivity? So if the productivity is defined in terms of just extracting some work from people. It is not something we want to focus on. We would like to focus more on the value driven, which is what kind of value that people are trying to give. And for that, there is a follow-up conversation. If we wanted to have value driven development, or if you wanted to really get value out of people, people needs to be engaged. And that's a good insight that Arne shared. There are 3 F's that you can use to definitely engage your workforce or try to build next generation organization, because building the next generation organization is all about engaging your workforce, right? So the 3 F that Arne shared is fun, fear, and focus. So there's a little bit of a good tension should be in your mind, which is your fear, and fun is people need to be really enjoying what they do. And the focus factor is, of course, people should be focused so that they don't get distracted too much on the different, I would say, the TDMs that is going around. And thanks so much for that insight, Arne. It was a good learning for me, the 3 F that I'm not going to forget. Okay, and there is a last question that I would like to take before we close this short webcast with your short note. With so many scaling frameworks that is there in the market, I think it's something that is beyond the scope of this workshop, but I would like to take this question. I don't want to disappoint the participant. So which framework leaders should suggest and go for? That's a question from a participant.
Yeah, and I agree. There are many scaling frameworks around nowadays, and those that I've heard about lately, SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, Large Scale Scrum or less, something which popped up during the last part of last year, Unfix, Scrum at Scale. I am involved in something called Agile Lean Leadership. And I believe that it is good to understand, why do we want to scale? And first of all, can we avoid it? Sometimes we can. So then we need to understand, why do we want to do that? And what framework helps us getting there? And then do a quick comparison. What is helping us the most? And don't be afraid of mixing. I am a strong believer in values, principles, and practices. So I usually start with the values and then the principles, and then I pick practices that helps supporting those values and principles. And within Agile Lean Leadership, for example, what you want to build organizations that are fast, to deliver value fast, to learn fast, and to change in the ever-changing world that we have now fast. Also, the purpose should be consistent. What we do, there should be a purpose not only today, but in the future, a long-time purpose as well. Reliable and resilient, so that we can deal with the unexpected in a good way. Every organization in the future needs to be innovative. So never forget about that. So there is a balance between structure and innovation. Too much structure, there is a risk that we kill innovation. And then, of course, empathy, focus. I talked before upon employees, but also clients and customers, but employees, because they need to be able to do good work as well. So if you can find an idea of where you want to go and why you want to go there, then pick the framework that helps you do that the most. And I personally like the frameworks that are based on clear values and principles. Some, to me, seems more like a collection of different things than something based upon values and principles.
Okay, so that's a good summary. So in short, Hari, so the first question we would probably ask, why scaling? So do we really need to scale? And choose the framework that fits the organization's values and principles. That's Arne's thoughts. I hope that answered your question, but I'm sure that we cannot suggest this framework is good, that framework is good. That's not the intention of this webcast, right? So it's more about building the right mindset in leaders. I would like to come to the final point of this webcast, Arne, because we are already running out of time. Thank you so much for accommodating a couple of more questions. I think this is a very short and crisp insights that we got out of you. on the next generation leadership, especially talking about the leadership mindsets and a couple of qualities of a leader, and also the environment creation. So you touched on the environment and the 3F factors. That is very useful. I hope to hosting you once again in the future, talking about maybe the next generation leadership episode 40 or 45, I don't know. So keep watching the webcast series. We are going to talk with a lot of thought leaders and legends, sharing their insights and experiences about the next leadership workshop. So thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, Arne, for your time. Would you like to say a few words before we close the webcast?
Yeah, I thank you for having me once again. And what I am thinking is that it's easy to forget that what we're talking about is breaking old habits and getting into new and better habits. And when things get stressful, it's so easy to go back to your old habits. So there is a temptation to fall back into command and control mode for leaders. So you should try to avoid that. And there is a temptation to look for facts rather than patterns to emerge. And that's also something that you need to avoid. And then sometimes there is a desire for quicker resolution of problems, and that cannot always be accomplished if you have the long-term goals in mind as well. So try to remember that the consistency is important, and so hard to be consistent, of course, long-term. So we all do good stuff, and we all make mistakes from time to time, but try to appreciate yourself when you do the good stuff. That's, yeah, I think that's good final words.
Thank you. So that was a very, very good message, Arne. Thank you very much for your time once again. I know that this is not the first time you're coming and spending your time with us. We look forward to hosting you once again. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.